Hello and welcome to America in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at the Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is the Center Square's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief, Casey Harper. How are you, Casey?
Doing good, Dan. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. We are recording this on Friday, February 16th. Casey, the U.S. House made history this week when it voted to impeach the first cabinet member in the nation's history. Republicans blame Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for the ongoing border crisis, allowing millions of illegal border crossers into the country in violation of congressionally passed laws. They also accuse him of lying to Congress over the border crisis. Mayorkas now faces trial in the Senate, where Democrats hold a slight majority and are expected to acquit him. Tell us more, Casey.
Yeah, as you said, this is unprecedented, the first time a sitting cabinet member has been impeached, and it is a strong rebuke from House lawmakers against President Joe Biden in particular, of course, for appointing Mayorkas and also his handling of the border crisis. Now, Mayorkas does have broad authority in how he deals with the border, but ultimately he is reporting to the president. I think from what House Republicans have been saying, this is really aimed right at Biden. Of course, they're very frustrated with Mayorkas. They've pointed out how they felt Mayorkas was not responsive enough to their inquiries, their requests for information. In the proceedings leading up to all this, Mayorkas defended himself, said he's testified before Congress many times and given them plenty of information. So I think there's some bad blood at this point. And of course, with the first impeachment of a sitting cabinet member, that is not that surprising. But really, this is a manifestation in D.C. of frustration that's growing across the nation because of what's happening south at the border of the U.S. and Mexico. Now, many of the people coming across into the U.S. are not from Mexico. They're from all kinds of countries, and not even just Latin American or South American countries. The border data, as you know, Dan, shows that people are traveling one way or another to South America, to Mexico, and then coming up through the southern border into the U.S. because they know it's very porous and it's easy to get across. So we know from great reporting at thecentersquare.com that more than 10 million illegal immigrants have entered the U.S. since President Biden took office. That's, more than the population of about 40 U.S. states. So this is not a small number. 10 million, that's more than the population of New York City. And so these are big numbers. They are impacting not just border states anymore. You have mayors, Democratic mayors in New York and Chicago complaining. People in Massachusetts, as far as Massachusetts,
Denver,
people are complaining about what's happening at the southern border.
We actually got new numbers from January just the other day, Casey. Just about 243,000 illegal border crossers in 1 month in January. So as Congress debates and accuses Mayorkas of being responsible for this crisis is ongoing, and it doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. So the ramifications, as you pointed out, are being felt nationwide. In addition to the humans that are coming across the border, there's illegal, essentially fentanyl is being poured into the country and making its way across the country. Fentanyl deaths have skyrocketed in the past few years. So it's touching every facet of American life.
Yeah, I mean, there's human trafficking, which is a huge issue as well. Child trafficking in particular. You have these unaccompanied minors showing up. You have, people with children that aren't related to them. And it's unclear and almost impossible to know if this child is being willingly brought into the U.S. or was maybe brought by coercion into the U.S. to help get in. And so this is, a big issue. Of course, this has played out in Congress recently where President Joe Biden has been pushing on lawmakers to pass a border bill. And so Democrats in the Senate negotiated something with Republican Senate leadership to put in place some border provisions, but there was really a revolt among Republicans. I think about half of Senate Republicans and a large majority of House Republicans, if not all, were very upset about this issue because they say it's disingenuous. They say the money is already there. The laws are already on the books for Biden to close the border, to enforce the border laws. He's just choosing not to do it. And then in an election year, he's saying, hey, Congress, you need to do something about this. And Republicans were very frustrated by this because they say you have everything you need. You've made some changes at the executive level to not enforce the border. And one of those would be, that deportations under President Biden have plummeted. Unless you have like a pretty bad criminal record, it's very unlikely that you're going to get deported out of the U.S. And this is a Biden era rule. And so word gets out on that. If you can just make it across the border, you're not going to get deported. Another example is being pretty lax on asylum. If you pretty much show up at the southern border and say that you are fearful to return to your home country, there's a very good chance you're just going to be allowed in. And those who are caught by Border Patrol, they get processed. Border agents, so much of their resources now are just processing and escorting migrants into the U.S. instead of catching and turning them away. So they're given, they're caught, they're given a court date, and then they say, hey, come back to this court date here in 2 years. And of course, they never come back. Who's going to come to a court date in 2 years when it's not even, your home country? So these are some of the procedural, I guess you could call it, administrative things that are helping facilitate this border crisis. And of course, Dan, we have covered extensively on this program and at thecentersquare.com about the Texas Governor Greg Abbott and his face-off with Biden about the border fencing. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, but that is another feature to this that I think helped propel enough political will to actually impeach Mayorkas.
Yeah, just briefly, Texas Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature has allocated more than $11 billion to border security efforts. They say, rightfully so, that border security is supposed to be an issue for the federal government to deal with, but because the federal government, as they say, is not dealing with it, they're spending state taxpayer dollars to erect this fencing. And then there's this dispute where the federal government is sending Border Patrol troops in to tear down the fencing as Texas puts it up. Many lawsuits making their way through the court systems. But let's go back to Mayorkas now. Casey, he is facing trial in the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats. Do you see any other result here other than an acquittal?
Yeah, I don't think that Mayorkas faces really any danger in the Senate. I think he's going to be just fine. There's just mostly the political implications of this. It might be a tough vote for a handful of senators, depending on their, respective states. But I think Mayorkas is going to be fine. He's not going to be removed unless Biden finds it politically expedient to remove him. And I think this point for Biden, it would be, I don't know, you could say it was an admission of guilt, but also Biden could change out his Mayorkas, put in a new one, say he's going to start taking the border seriously, sort of throw Mayorkas under the bus in an election year and put someone else in place. I think that's much more likely than any impeachment taking Mayorkas down.
As usual, Casey, thank you for your insight into this very important story. Listeners can keep up with the developments in the Mayorkas impeachment and more at thecentersquare.com. For Casey Harper, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.